Welcome to the Creating Responsible Companies podcast, episode number 1. My name is Janet Craig, and
I'm Barbara Anderson.
And Barbara and I are founding partners of a company called Destination Better, where we help companies become more responsible. And over the last several years, Barbara and I have worked together. We both have a history in this industry, working inside other companies, and we've worked from a consulting perspective with some of the world's largest companies. And about a year ago, we started thinking about how we can make a bigger impact. And so we want to talk a little bit about that today on episode 1, tell you about how we got here, a little bit about ourselves, and we have a super duper gift for you at the end of it that's going to be really valuable, we think, for you moving forward, and we hope that you're inspired. So Barbara, how in the world did we get here to making a podcast?
Well, where we are in our company now, Destination Better, is we are on a mission to make the world a better place, one responsible company at a time. And that's both socially and environmentally. And so as we thought about this mission and how we can fulfill this mission and making an impact on the world, we're both moms, we see the future ahead, and we know that companies have the resources and tools, both financial tools, human resource tools. They have the reach, they have the systems, they have the technology, and they are being more and more expected to help solve some of the world's problems, where we used to see that governments solved those problems. And so as we've consulted and worked inside of companies and been involved in leading a number of initiatives, we saw the value of this. And for us to make an impact and fulfill our company's missions, we knew that we had to do something with all of these tools that we have created over the years that are, if they're not being used, then they aren't making an impact, right?
Yeah, and some pretty good advice too. Barbara and I continue to mentor students who are in sustainability programs in college. Yep. That's where you and I met. When you were getting your master's in global sustainability, and I was speaking, and Barbara came up to me and she said, "Hi, I'm Barbara. We speak the same language." And I was like, "Oh, thank heavens!" And so we mentor a lot of the students. We mentor corporate social responsibility professionals that are inside their businesses already, inside their companies, and then we work with a lot of leaders too, kind of educating them, because the business world is very different than it was when they were in business school, and we've got investor pressure now, consumer pressure, rapid spread of information across the internet, on social media, and so we've got a lot of experience and tools and things that we've learned that we continue to share one-on-one with clients and help them with their strategies. But we decided we could make a better impact and a bigger impact if we shared those things and got them out there so people can get out there and start creating more responsible organizations.
Yep. So as we're at this crossroads of things that need to take place across the world in every country, we said if we took this to a platform like a podcast, that people would be able to use those resources. So what we're committed to with this podcast called Creating Responsible Companies is with each episode, we'll have a tool or resource that corporate social responsibility professionals would be able to use, as well as leaders. And leaders, what we find a lot of times is it's a space that they're not familiar with. As you said, Janet, a lot of them graduated from business school when you and I did, when the goal of the business college graduates was to make money and then make more money and help your company then make more money. And that's just not something that is sustainable for the long term, and people don't want to work for companies that's their sole focus. So in order for them to be responsible internally to their stakeholders or employees, as well as externally to their supply chain, to local governments, and to government officials, and to
the communities that they're operating in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So each episode will have tools and resources. So we'll walk through some of the programs that we've developed in terms of how it can apply to you. So that's really the focus, is to hand this information off. And we'll occasionally have some interviews with people who have done some great work. And every time we do that, we'll have a tool or resource that they can take, including this episode.
One of the things I know that I would have found valuable when I first started in this industry is that I spent a lot of time contacting other professionals looking for tools and resources. Like, do you have the numbers for this? Do you have a spreadsheet that does this? How did you find that information? And now, of course, I've got so many links that I've saved to different things that I believe that if this had been around when I first started on my CSR path, it would have been really great. But that's why you and I are here.
That's right. And between us, we've founded organizations in Dallas. I led with some other really smart people developing the DFW Corporate Citizenship Network. And then Janet and I here in the Tampa Bay area formed the Tampa Bay Corporate Responsibility Network. And that was so that we could network and share best practices. And so this is the next evolution of that, to be able to share on a broader scale. But we want to do this in a way that's the most valuable to our listeners, right?
That is exactly right. So we have set up a website that is multi-generational friendly.
That's right.
We have a little button you can put on our Say Hello page. If you go to our website, there's a page for episodes and about us, and there's a Say Hello tab. You can leave us a quick little voicemail. We will actually listen to it because, unlike our millennial children, we'll actually listen to that voicemail. And you can also email us or send us a note. And if there's something that you want to talk about, you want us to cover at some point in time, we can certainly do that. We also have a Facebook page for a Destination Better company that you can follow. And we also have a Facebook group for creating responsible companies, so that if you want to get in that group and talk and communicate with some other CSR professionals and get some thoughts and ideas out there and feel supported and be part of this community, we'd love to have you.
That's right. Our website is destinationbetter.com. On Facebook, we can be found at Destination Better, and also on Instagram and YouTube. So we look forward to getting your input on any of those channels. In this episode, we're going to walk through how each of us came across our own superpowers, and we have a really great little tool that everyone else can use to develop their own superpowers or to identify them, right? So we all know we're good at a lot of things, but what is it that really is like where you get your stride? And then the next two episodes are part of a two-part series. The first one is about the 5 global trends that have taken place that have most impacted corporate social responsibility and where it is today. What's really made it mainstream today? And then the next episode.
Oh, yes. In episode 3, it's going to be my favorite, where we're going to walk through some really powerful statistics and data. And that's like my favorite word.
Data is her favorite 4-letter word.
You can't argue with it. It's so amazing. So we're going to look at some data and some statistics. And I think it's also going to support that episode 2, kind of about how did we get here, because it seems like some people kind of stand up and go, oh my God, where did this come from? It's not like it wasn't an overnight thing. There are little bits and trends and things like that have kind of crept up over the years, and now that we understand a little bit better how it happened, we'll be able to explain that. And hopefully after those first 2 or 3 episodes, 4 episodes, you guys will have our listeners will have a little bit better understanding of what it is and how it can impact their business or their organization, and how they can impact the world in a really positive place.
That's right. And this is all of the tools I'd like to add to, Janet, is that they can be used inside of Fortune 500 companies. They also can be used for small and medium-sized businesses, because we know that's where the lion's share of businesses are. And so if we can make an impact in those small and medium-sized businesses, what's your saying, Janet, about that?
Oh, it doesn't take big business to make a big difference.
That's right. So little businesses can make a big impact. And so we'll share some of those stories as well. So these tools can be used there. So how about now, if we jump in a little bit about our stories and what got us. So now, how about if we jump into our stories, how we got to where we are now. And I think by listening to those, people who are in this field will be able to I think by listening to our stories, people in this field will be able to understand some of the challenges that they're facing, that we've faced, and how it's kind of unique to this space. And so we look forward to sharing those and to hearing on the tool that we have as a download what they learn about their own superpowers and post it.
That's right. Barbara and I actually went through this superpower tool earlier this year. We've spent the last year in working, but also in reflection of how we can, like we said, how we can widen our own kind of impact on the world. And so part of it was going through that, and it made a lot of sense after we went through it and shared what each other's superpowers are, because that's what makes us a really great partnership, and it makes us see things differently. So we usually get to the same place, but we come from two very different places. Very different places, but we get to the same spot. And that's what we find in companies, is that one of the reasons that we work really well with our audience, and especially when we do workshops and public workshops and things like that, that there's usually word people and there's usually number people, and we make it work.
That's right. So we're glad you're here. Let's jump into our stories now. Okay, so on today's podcast, what we thought we would do is tell a little bit about our backstory so that people can kind of put in context why we're doing what we're doing. And what's so exciting is that we have a tool on our website for this episode, which is destinationbetter.com/1, because it's episode number 1. And they can download it to discover their superpower. So what we go through now is what our superpowers are and how we got them, why we're here today, right?
Yeah, how kind of we started in careers that had seemingly unrelated paths that turned into something really great, and how we discovered and had some kind of aha moments along the way that got us to where we are, because we're asked that question a lot.
We are. And I think it will help people relate to some of the challenges that maybe they're having as it relates to what the journey that we've been on, respectively.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about yours.
So I was born upstate New York in this beautiful small little town. And I had these great parents. I still have my mom. And they always taught me to believe in myself. And as a result, I've always been driven to meet their expectations. When my family moved to Florida, I was 10 years old. And in high school, I was in leadership roles as treasurer of the student government and president of my service club. And in school, I hung around with kids who I thought were like me. They were the smart kids. At the time, I considered myself one of them, but my grades said otherwise. I think because I spent so much time on relationships and in leadership positions that studying was a second priority.
I can tell you that Barbara spends a lot of time developing relationships, but it has helped in our client work too.
That's right. It's my
For
superpower.
Sure. Definitely.
Just don't tell my parents that it was a second priority. They've always been so amazing in their belief in me that I really wanted to make them proud. And when I went to Florida State University, I wanted to get exceptional grades to demonstrate my appreciation to them for sending me to college. They grew up in the Great Depression and started with very little, so the money they used to send me to college did not come easy to them. They believed not only in the power of education, but they wanted me to have every opportunity in life to succeed. One thing that's always fascinated me is the power of advertising, as well as how much money companies spend on it. And I figured that there had to be a way for me to get a job and get some of that money. So when I was at FSU on my own, I used to go to the library every week and read a publication called Advertising Age, because each publication gave great detail about ad campaigns that companies were running. It explained the reasoning behind the demographics they were trying to reach and the specific words they used and how the two connected to get people to buy their products and services. For example, look at Taco Bell today. They're targeted to young males. And when you look at their ad campaigns, you can see this play out. I've always been really driven to be successful, but honestly, in college, as I look back at my grade point average, it was so low, I'm surprised that I graduated. In fact, my GPA was so low I couldn't even get into my dream advertising program. It was a small program and they only accepted the top few percent of applicants. So I opted for a degree in marketing, which in hindsight, I'm glad that I had the education from the College of Business. I also think back on how few job offers I received when I graduated, when my classmates had several. I guess because I knew what I could accomplish, but on paper, my grades said otherwise. And because of this, I felt like I had to work really, really hard to prove myself. Or otherwise, I wouldn't be successful and not only be able to provide for myself, but I might disappoint my parents who really tried to get me a leg up in life. So after Florida State, I moved to Texas where the jobs were plentiful. But because of my graduating GPA, I wasn't so lucky and had to pay a recruiting firm to help me find a job. My first job was in marketing for a high-end remodeling company in Dallas, where I learned about how salespeople can sell what customers want, but the construction team can't always really deliver. I went on to work for Hertz Rent-A-Car at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in operations, where at age 24, I had as many as 100 people reporting to me. I worked really hard and was recruited away by a competitor, Budget Rent-A-Car, where I managed 5 small community operations and a local reservation center. I loved getting to really know my team members and went out of my way to foster relationships with them, which proved beneficial for all of us and our sales numbers. I then went into a business partnership to launch an entrepreneurial venture where our company conducted customer service evaluations for businesses across the U.S., including car dealerships, retail operations, and McDonald's. Along with my colleagues, we wrote a book on customer service in business. I then got married and had a daughter and quickly realized that I needed a more routine schedule with health insurance. So I got a job at American Airlines where they actually weren't hiring. So go figure that one out. I was tenacious because I knew in my soul if I could get my foot in that door in any way, I could be successful. So I started at American Airlines as a provisional or temporary employee with no benefits at $5 an hour. I worked hard and wound up being the first provisional employee to travel outside the U.S. for work, actually to London, where I met my next boss. I started in human resources, and in the 3rd week on the job, my 1-year-old daughter had some seizures and went into the hospital, resulting in me having to be out of work for a week. I thought for sure my new career with the airline was over. But because I had quickly developed strong relationships with my new boss and coworkers, they stayed after hours and came in early to cover for me for a week. I'm still in touch with these wonderful people, and I still appreciate them rescuing American Airlines' newest employee who was hired during a hiring freeze. Within the airline, I went on to work in international HR, in the training department, as an HR partner in the purchasing department, as a recruiter, and in organizational development. It was when I was in consulting in internal organizational development where we partnered with departments to help them improve their relationships, actually so that they could run efficiently. My boss approached me to say that there was a position for a job in a new department called Community Relations. I had just received my HR professional certification, so I thought my career was destined in HR, but I thought I'd check it out. Little did I know that this was about to be a turning point in my journey to where I am today. When I walked into the interview, I shook the hiring manager's hand, and she immediately said, before we even talked, "With your background, you'd be perfect for this position." I wish every job had been so easy to get. But seriously, she had heard that I had relationship building skills, which are paramount to being successful in a position in corporate social responsibility. So I started this completely new department called Community Relations, which reported to corporate communications. The position was in Sabre, which was then the technology arm of American Airlines, and was the booking and reservation system used by the majority of airlines in the world. I was charged with figuring out how this community relations function worked. The company knew it should have some kind of corporate giving and volunteering, so I started putting some systems into place for a function primarily focused on its headquarter locations in Texas. This was wide open territory with no framework, no operational plan, no goals, no rules, nothing. The company knew that we should give money to charities and that we had employees who wanted to volunteer. That was as much as we knew. So with some colleagues, we tried some things. We had to create volunteer events from scratch. We put rules into place. We had to be on site to manage the events, work with the nonprofits to develop activities. We were building from absolute scratch. And for our company giving, we gave some money here and there based on who asked and how much of a budget I had. And it was fun. And we were starting to understand what worked and what didn't. But this giving and volunteering thing was seen by senior management as expensive. And they weren't quite sure what the point of it was, other than to be nice to the community. They started asking about what the company was getting in return for all of this. And to be honest, other than building the company's relationship in the community and making employees feel good about volunteering, I really couldn't answer them. So here I am in this new position, now with my back against the wall to figure out how to make something out of giving and volunteering. I had to create some value so that the company was receiving a benefit and so that management could get behind it. I was now a mom of 2 little children, and I knew that I had no choice but to step it up so that I could provide for them. I had to figure out a way to make all of this volunteering and money giving add value to the company, or our company's management was going to put a stop to it. Now keep in mind that this was in the mid-1990s, when very few companies had any sort of programs, much less dedicated staff to manage them. Then I had an epiphany. I was the only person in the company who was responsible for this. No one understood this role, including me. I had to find people who did what I was asked to do. I had to learn about this giving and volunteering thing from others who could explain to me how their company managed their programs and delivered beneficial value. So I got to work and figured out a plan. I found organizations like the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship, BSR, which is Business for Social Responsibility, and other organizations who offered training, and each had an annual conference. So I went to my boss to ask for funding to send me to be with people who did what I did. Fortunately, she increased my professional development budget, and this was the beginning of many years of continuous learning. It turned out that I wasn't the only one who was in my situation. And as I started learning in the mid-1990s, I realized that I was on the forefront of a huge shift in business. So off I went to be around my peeps. And my, oh my, what a revelation. When I got to events, I felt like I was home. Finally, someone not only understood what I did, they knew how to do it. So I jumped in like a sponge to learn everything I could. I returned to my company informed and inspired. I started implementing initiatives that made sense and that used the company's money in a way that added value back to the business. I was so enlightened. And then I realized something. These other companies had bigger budgets and bigger teams, and they were doing really big things. In my competitive nature and my quest to be respected professionally, I felt like I wasn't doing as big of things. Their work seemed so cool and so far-reaching. I had to figure out how they did this. I found out that my colleagues had more support from their management. It was then that I realized that my leaders didn't understand what I did. Why? Because I didn't educate them. While I was on this fast path to ramp up my personal knowledge and apply it to the business, I failed to bring them along. How did I expect them to be as excited about what we were accomplishing if I didn't tell them? I'd always been the person who wanted to achieve things on my own, and I'd enjoyed such a solid reputation professionally that I thought that my leaders should trust that I knew what I was doing. And maybe they did. But in hindsight, I was missing a huge opportunity. If I didn't bring them along this journey that started as giving and volunteering and turned into a key component of our company's strategy, how could I truly make progress? This was a huge learning moment. This was a huge learning moment for me that I had to have leadership support or I could not do my job. I even had a leader say that I didn't ask him for help when he had really wanted to engage. And this was the beginning of a decade of continually educating my leadership, of bringing them along this rapidly changing field. And from that point forward, I have been a huge champion of educating leaders. I went on to serve on numerous committees and boards with Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship. I taught a class on corporate citizenship in the 21st century and was invited to be a speaker at a number of events about our successful programs. Our programs at Sabre became one of the most respected components of the company. It was very visible. Our work in what became global corporate responsibility grew to engage our 10,000 employees in 42 countries. Our work was not only one of the top reasons touted for joining the company, but our work was not only one of the top reasons touted for joining the company, but our little team had a bigger impact on the positive culture of the company than anything else the company was doing. These experiences led me to continue to learn. After 15 years in this best job in the company, I left Sabre to help my parents back in Florida. I've become a lifelong learner who always wants to be on top of the best practices, which today have exploded from where I began. I'm so passionate about this work that I went back to college to get my master's in global sustainability, and that's where Janet and I met. So I know this was long, but I hope this story explains my passion for this space and my vision. I know this was long, but I hope that this story explains my passion for this space and my vision for taking what I've learned and sharing it to help others accelerate their progress. Leaders, corporate social responsibility professionals, and everyday superheroes shouldn't have to figure it out on their own. They should be able to leverage from the lessons of those who went before them. And when I think about the reach that our podcast can have, I'm completely overwhelmed and totally energized to make it happen.
Barbara, your history is amazing. Every time that we talk about it, I think that we have so many things to talk about in this podcast, so many things that you've worked on in human trafficking and responding in crisis moments and your paradox moment, which we'll talk about it in a podcast at one time, that it's so hard to, and I know that you said that you thought it was long. It's really hard to encapsulate the work that you've done into a few short minutes, but I hope that our readers or our listeners readers and listeners, I guess, will find it and see that maybe that career path they want to take, they may take some paths here and there that yours kind of came together.
Yes, and they also will have bumps in the road and can get past those. And that's why we're going to provide some tools for them so that they can get on a steady course and stay on it and learn from people like you. So, Janet, you've got a great background and yours is different than mine, which makes us such a great team. So
it is.
Tell us.
Sometimes I think that we're the left brain, right brain, and that's what makes us a great partnership.
That's right.
So many times, I know you get this question, so many times we get asked, like, how did you get here? Y'all have such a cool company and a cool job. And I want to say, every time that somebody says, you have a cool job, it doesn't matter if it's my job or your job or Beyonce's job. If they say cool, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It is not going to be something easy. So that's the first thing I think about. And the second thing that I think about is when they say, how did you get here? I'm like, how much time do you have? So we're going to try and make it as fast as possible. So my in college, I studied finance only because my parents didn't think it'd be really great if I went to sing and dance on Broadway, which was my number one. And they're like, yeah, I don't think so. So I've always loved numbers and I've always loved patterns and finance and processes and things like that. And so that's what I ended up studying. And I always want to know, like, the backstory on things. Like, if I buy something or if a company all of a sudden pops up in my view, like, how did they get there? What's their story? And just kind of how those things developed. And this is coming from a person, whose dad, if he had had his way, I would have been born on our boat and not in a hospital, because we spent a lot of time fishing when I was growing up. I know that you had a lot of time up in upstate New York in your beautiful city and town that you grew up in. But while Barbara was doing work in high school with all the cool kids, I was probably fishing That's where I spent most of my time. People are like, I don't remember you in high school. I'm like, it's probably because I was on a boat. But it undoubtedly influenced where I am today. I learned how to work on a team. I learned everybody has a job. I learned how to deal in crisis when you have medical emergencies on a boat, you have weather that picks up on a boat, and that you have to figure out problems very, very quickly. So it gave me definitely a true appreciation for our natural environment, especially here where we're based in Florida, in the St. Pete area. And I studied finance after fishing pretty much my whole life, graduated, decided I didn't want to work at a bank, and I ended up working in a really cool place. Believe it or not, sounds really boring, commercial printing. It was so cool. There were so many numbers that I had to crunch every day, press sheets going through presses and inks, and there was environmental stuff that I had to take care of, and the social side. I had about 50 employees, making sure that they were safe and healthy and all of those things. And so I was there for almost 20 years, managed a lot of groups of creative people that worked on publications and advertising, and we just did really cool stuff. But I had to leave my company because of a divorce, and it was really sad when I had to leave. And I thought, there's no way I will ever find my way outside of this little family that was my family for almost 2 decades. And so off I went, and I had 2 little boys, and for some reason, I walked into Apple one day and I thought, this would be a really cool place to work. I didn't know anything about computers, but I knew that Mac products or Apple products my entire company had based on them. So I went to work at Apple, and iPods were super duper hot, and people were coming in the store with their iPods to return them when they were going to get a new one. And they were questioning, where do our electronics go? Just like people would question, like, where does that ink go when you're done with it? And it's when I first got the thought in my mind that consumers care, and that consumers really do care about the environmental and social impacts of the things that they're buying. And this was in the early 2000s. You were well into your career at that point. But it was something that I thought that I was in this kind of like, random job that had nothing to do with printing. And sure, they were totally different industries, but the outcomes were the same, and that is there is environmental and social impacts in both of them. And in the retail environment, though, when people are asking questions, you've got to answer. So I just kind of became increasingly curious about this. And then me with my number brain, I really wanted to know more about it. Do companies that are sustainably kind of focused in that environmental social, do they outperform those who don't? Are they better? What do they do? And you have an advertising and marketing background. I worked in that industry for a long time. I was super curious about it. Then I got an opportunity to work for Xerox, and it was in sales. I had a huge public sector territory. I had a great relationship with Xerox in printing, and I jumped at the chance. And everybody, in sales at Xerox, training is like super serious. Like, it's super serious. Like, dun, dun, dun. It is like super serious. And but they teach you things that you're going to learn for life. It's not like people go, I'll never use this algebra again. I will use Xerox training every single day for the rest of my life. It completely changed my life. So everybody in sales one day got handed this sales deck, like a PowerPoint deck, and we're all like, oh God, it's another technical document we're going to have to learn, and we have to deliver to my boss and my boss's boss. And then we found out that somebody from the executive leadership was coming down to watch these presentations. And I just thought, oh gosh, please, I don't want to talk about impressions per minute, So I get handed this PowerPoint, was told that I was going to be presenting to all these people. And I was like, oh God, can't wait to see this one. Well, I had no idea. That day completely changed the trajectory of my life, 100%. I remember opening this document and I'm like, oh my gosh, everything just came together. Printing, finance, Apple, environment, social, manufacturing. I literally was jumping up and down in the office, and people are looking at me like I'm completely nuts. And it was because the document wasn't some boring technical thing. It was because we had to learn and present Xerox's sustainability story to those executives.
Yep. Putting you on the line there.
Putting us on the line.
Salespeople.
Because what better people to share that story? So the people that I worked with, they probably spent like 10 minutes before they went in to give their presentation to give it right. I spent 2 weeks. I spent 2 weeks researching, making sure I was going to deliver it right, looking at Xerox's manufacturing process and what happened at Palo Alto Research Center Park, which everybody should follow because they do the coolest things out there, and like just the water filtration and how they were generating toners that were better for people to breathe in when they were making lots of copies in their office. And it was just amazing. And I literally was just in heaven. And I got data, I got story, I even presented it to my kids. I wanted to make sure that they understood.
And what was their reaction?
And they were preteens at the time. They totally got it. They were really super excited. So anyway, the day comes, I walk in this room. Here's my manager, a few other managers, this awesome executive who I just adored, and we ended up having a great relationship. I get my presentation. They sit completely stone-faced through it. And I'm like, oh gosh, I just totally bombed that. And at the end of it, they just like all sat there stunned like, oh my God, what just happened? Like, this chick really knows her stuff. It was because it was the easiest thing I'd ever done. I knew at that point, we talk about superpowers, I knew. I mean, I had hit my stride like a horse in a horse race, man. I was gone. So I ended up using that tool to open a lot of doors for me in sales and in the state of Florida when I was with Xerox. So I talked to a lot of sustainability directors that were heads of companies, universities, state and local governments. And the more that I talked to them, the more that I knew that I just had to figure out how I could get a full-time job in this industry. So I just happened to be at a business lunch for a board that I was on because was doing some work in sustainability and business, and I'd served on this board. I recently dropped off. I was on it for 9 years. Gosh. And this guy sits next to me from a small sustainability consulting firm. He's like, hi, I'm John. I'm with XYZ company. My eyes were like, whoa. Because I'd researched this company and I thought I could never work there. Like, they would never hire me. And I just looked at him. I'm like, hi, I'm Janet. You should hire me. And I had a job in a week.
Go girl.
I know, man. So I started learning about greenhouse gas inventories, presenting technical information to non-technical audiences and seeing their little light bulb moments and all that good stuff. Continue to research trends. Learned how to do everything that not everything, but learned to do a lot of things that I didn't know. I knew the concepts and the processes. I knew that the numbers worked. The numbers worked for a bunch of engineers at Xerox, and they knew that it made their company more profitable. I figured it could be applied to everybody else, right? So anyway, worked there for a while, and one day I got a referral opportunity to write the first corporate sustainability report for one of the largest landowners in the U.S. It's a publicly held company, but a person who led the parent company that owned the firm where I was working questioned my ability to do the job. And at first I was offended, but like you, I realized that the reason is that he just didn't understand the value of it. He didn't understand the value of CSR. The CEO of the company that needed the report understood the value, but it's a continual process to educate executives, especially those that were in business school in the 80s. That's what we learned. Things that you and I are talking about, Barbara, don't show up on financial statements until it's too late. So I ended up winning the job. I worked with that company's leadership team. We interviewed engineers all over the country. That was a hoot. And I wrote the report. It ended up winning some Addy Awards for the company that I work with that actually designed the report. And it was amazing. They loved it so much that they printed one for every one of the employees, all of their customers, everybody in their supply chain. It was incredible. So I'm like, all right, I got to get out of here. I got to start my own company. I have to do this. I'm just going to keep writing these award-winning reports, and like, it's just going to be great, like flipping on a switch. But the reality is that not all the CEOs that I spoke with about that I worked with in my company really just innately took that on. And it was kind of an uphill battle, but I was working hard, had my own company, and writing CDP reports and doing all kinds of cool stuff inside companies, putting teams together, actually talking to companies about the fact that they could, if they wanted, save money on their energy.
What a concept.
What a concept, right? You just don't have to write that check all the time like that. You can save some money. And I was mentoring a group of students who were studying sustainability. That was part of my pro bono give back. Is I did this program for 3 years where I would take groups of students from different universities inside our Tampa Bay area and give them real world sustainability experience at real companies so that they could take that experience, put on their resume, and go and get jobs. And, you know, we're going to have some of those students who are now working in great positions on our show in the future. But I was there, and I was at one of the universities giving a talk. And afterwards, Barbara comes up to me and she says, "Hi." She sticks out her hand. "Hi, I'm Barbara. We speak the same language." And I was like, I'm not alone anymore. Like, there's somebody else here that is, I'm not alone. I can't believe it. So Barbara and I we started working together within the year, and we've done some really cool stuff in the last few years. So I started the company in I guess it's 6 years old now. So about a year ago, Barbara and I were thinking, we've done this really great work. We had stopped, you know, everybody kind of stops at the end of the year and they're like, how did we do this year? And Barbara and I stopped and we're like, how did we do this year? And we thought, well, we did really well. You know, our company does better and better every year. But like, what are we really doing? Are we really pushing the needle? How can we do better? So we're big fans of John Lee Dumas.
JLD.
Boom, shake the room. And we went through his program called 3 Hours to Your Big Idea. And Barbara and I did it separately. And I think that we were both kind of like, oh, I wonder if we're going to come up with the same thing. What happens if we don't come up with the same thing? Oh my God, what are we going to do, right? So we have the big reveal day. Big reveal day comes. And it ends up that Barbara and I, although we came from two very different backgrounds, Barbara's very relationship and community and focused, and I just want the numbers to work. I want to look at trends. I want to take all these crazy disparate pieces of information and make them make sense. And we came to the exact same place. And that is that the only way that we're going to move the needle is if we start sharing what we're doing with the world, and we're going to do that through a podcast.
That's right.
And so we continue to work with clients one-on-one. We continue to mentor students. We continue to mentor CSR professionals that are in their jobs, because let me tell you, folks, sometimes when you're the only one or you have a really small team, it's frustrating sometimes and it's lonely. So we continue to do that work and we love it, but we are ready to just show people what this is, make it easy for them. And so that they can go and change the world and make their businesses and their organizations more responsible, and really feel like that we can just make the world a better place, which is why our company is called Destination Better.
That's right.
And our podcast is called Creating Responsible Companies.
So I enjoyed your story, and it's been so interesting as we both documented this and how we came to where we are today. And it's one of those things, and we do call it a superpower because it's something that we inherently enjoy and love and keep up with, and are continually looking at best practices and how companies can use these best practices. And a lot of what we do is technical and policy development, presentations for boards of directors, and all across strategy development, goal development. But what really gets the job done, as you and I both found, is relationships and processes, and starting from A and going to Z. And as I learned so abruptly, that I had to have leadership support. And I think that's, for corporate social responsibility professionals now, is one of the hardest things, is to get that support, because you continually have to educate them about the return on investment of what they're doing, unlike any other function in the company, right, Janet?
It is. But now every single day, it seems like institutional investors understand that value. They are talking to their publicly held companies about how to reflect that value. through information that's not found on financial statements. So that's important. But they're doing it in a really positive way. And I think that, like you said, relationships are so important. I think that new kind of investor company, publicly held company relationship is something that 10 years ago people would have said, that's not going to happen. I don't need to talk to my investor. As long as I've got this, that, and they're happy and I've got my returns, I'm good. But a lot of what you and I are talking about and what we'll talk about in this podcast again, sometimes those things aren't always quickly reflected in financial statements. And the other thing is, if they aren't and you're doing a really good job and you're measuring it, why aren't you telling that story? I mean, there are gold mines of things that we find when we start working with companies that they're like, we had no idea we were doing so well because we were comparing ourselves against somebody else. And when you do that, you're not going to get anywhere. So take in your internal inventories, and we've got some great tools to do that with. And that it doesn't matter what size company you are, if you're publicly held in a private equity portfolio, an entrepreneur, a small startup, or retail, it doesn't matter. Everybody turns on a light switch. Most people hire people, somebody's selling a good service. And so we've just got to make it easy for them to figure it out and feel really good about what they're doing.
That's right. And a couple things is one of the reasons that we have passion for this is that we see the results that it delivers to companies. And we've got a 3-step process that we'll introduce in a future episode that'll make it easy. But we can see that it attracts by telling this story, as you said, Janet, and it's such a huge missed opportunity for companies. By telling their story, it has so many benefits. Of course, you have to have a story and track it and document and be transparent by sharing information. But to attract and retain key talent, especially the millennials and Generation Zs, which we'll talk about in our next episode, they want to work at a company that aligns with their values, and they won't work somewhere where they can't tell their friends, this is the company I work for, this is why they're good, and this is why I'm proud of them. And so it's really key for that, and also the older generations as well. So each episode we're going to provide tools and resources and make this easy for companies. And in the next episode, we've got the 5 major trends that we see that have brought corporate social responsibility to where it is today. It's part of a 2-part series. And then the next episode after that, number 3, Janet, is talking about all of the headlines and facts and data that shows that how corporate social responsibility is ingrained in business today. And
that's going to be my favorite show.
I know. It is.
It's number time, folks.
That's right.
This is stuff you can't argue with. You definitely can't argue with it. So we're super excited.
We are excited. So
what should they do if they want to continue to listen, and where are they going to find our information?
So we're going to be on, probably the easiest place is on our website, destinationbetter.com altogether. And /1 will be the URL for this episode, where they can download the tool about identifying their superpowers. We are also on 4 different channels: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Play. And in addition to that, we're on the social media channels. Facebook. We have a Facebook group, which we'd love to have folks join and be amongst like-minded people. We'll talk about that in a future episode. Also on Instagram and on YouTube. So the video of this, if one's so inclined to watch it, can be on there, which will be nice when we have future tools that we can actually show during the episode.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to doing this with you and going on this awesome, incredible journey. If it could be better than the journey that you and I have been on the past however long it's been, I think it's going to be great. I'm super excited.
Yep. And all the people we've met along this journey who are inspired and want to do something but don't really have the tangible way to know how, we're really excited. And our goal is to equip, empower, and encourage corporate social responsibility professionals, leaders, and everyday superheroes, people who want to make some kind of social or environmental impact in their company, but maybe don't know where to start or how to do it. So we're going to walk you through that.